There have been considerable protests today.
And they don't have any belief in law or justice or right and wrong.
How everyone is calling for a peaceful transition.
Lenin said, we must speak in a language
these Trump pinatas, and they
which
set it
brings
on fire.
hate and derision towards those with whom we disagree.
Thousands of people are in the streets tonight, pretty spontaneously.
He was sucker punched, his clothes torn off his back.
The strategy is to create chaos.
Lenin said, we must speak in a language which brings hate and derision towards those with whom we disagree.
The ultimate goal of those people is to usurp power. I mean, when you think about, everybody knows the term useful idiots.
You demonize the opposition. You make Donald Trump, he's even worse. And so that's where they came up with racism, sexism, xenophobia, all these things.
Why do you think the reaction to President Trump has been so absolutely over the top? Why do they just seem to be so obsessed with bringing him down?
Well, for one thing, he's very sure of himself. And unlike previous squishy Republican presidents, Donald Trump doesn't back down. Like, he digs in for a fight, and he's not, he doesn't let anybody walk all over him.
After they were told this couldn't happen, he couldn't win, Hillary was going to win in a landslide, they had kind of a nervous breakdown. They became unhinged.
The mainstream media tells us that these riots and acts of violence are completely unorganized, defined as spontaneous in nature. But is that really the truth?
Fucking don't lie, you're shrouded!
Fucking policy, you policies that you
Seeing these demonstrations are understandable. I don't think there's any evidence they're caused by professional protesters.
You don't just make a spontaneous protest where 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people show up with a specific agenda in mind. You don't create things like that. That comes through organization.
My name is Trevor Loudon. I'm an activist, author and documentary filmmaker from Christchurch, New Zealand. I have dedicated my life to researching radicals and terrorists. These people are threatening your freedom. Why does that matter to me? Because if your country goes down, so does mine. The unrest on your streets poses a much deeper threat than many Americans realize. As part of my research, I spoke to investigative journalist James O'Keefe.
And what we found was this nexus of activity where these operatives would tell us how they would hire mentally ill people to go out and disrupt these protests.
We have mentally ill people that we pay to do shit. Make no mistake.
These Trump people, they would go into these protests and they would try to induce violence, get a response. And if you watch these videos we produced, it's disturbing, the candor and the degree to which they bragged about doing this. This guy's name was Scott Foval. He worked for a nonprofit organization in Wisconsin, and he says, quote, the Clinton campaign pays the DNC, the DNC pays this group Democracy Partners, which is a consulting firm, and Democracy Partners pays the Foval group, this is Scott Foval, this individual, and they go out and they execute the expletive on the ground.
The campaign pays DNC, DNC pays Democracy Partners pays the Foval group, the Foval group goes and executes the shit on the ground.
And this guy at the top, Bob Creamer was his name, an old friend of Barack Obama, community organizer. This guy at the top was involved in all of it. In fact, he went to the White House some 300 times, met with the president 47 times. And he was forced to resign his post as connected to the Clinton campaign as a result of these videos.
You uncovered the Fauville operation. Do you think there are other similar operations going?
Absolutely. In fact, right now, we do have some people, I think you guys went into one of these J20 groups where we have people who are inside the boot camp, which was the planning session for the inauguration on the 14th and 15th of January, and exposing all the different techniques and tactics. Some of these things are blatantly illegal, and some of them are violent. Most of them are just illegal.
I assembled a team to go undercover, penetrating the secretive underworld of a socialist group known appropriately as Disrupt J20. After weeks of exchanging emails, my team were finally given the invitation to attend the big meeting. We were surprised to find the location was the basement of St. Stephen's Episcopal Church just outside of Washington, D.C. Here is just a portion of what we uncovered.
On the 18th, our first big action is planned. This is going to be a cheer dance party at Mike Pence's house. We got a bunch of folks who are organizing that. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be his last few days living in Chevy Chase before he moves into the Mike presidential residence, and we're going to send him off with a bit. Early in the morning, we're going to be doing blockades. We're going to be blockading checkpoints into the security zone. We're also going to be blockading roads and other modes of transit into the city. We're going to do everything we can to try to stop people from being able to access the operation.
We overheard them talking about trying to disrupt a train on the railroad tracks, setting down chains. I mean, definitely immoral, illegal, maybe even terroristic activities.
We need to basically make this a non-peaceful transition at the absolute cost.
And so how are you guys planning to disrupt them throughout the day?
Starting with everything from checkpoint blockades to traffic blockades. The plan is to make the entire inauguration a total clusterfuck.
I find there's a lot of coordination between Disrupt J20 and some of the other groups. They're in fact, one of the ladies that worked for Bob Creamer is intimately involved with Disrupt J20. Lauren Windsor was her name.
There are clear ties between the Democrats and the J20 movement, but our team has discovered even more troubling connections. Here we have assembled profiles of the puppet masters guiding the chaos unfolding on America's streets. All are leaders of the Workers' World Party or the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Workers' World followed the theories of communist dictators Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong. They have been organizing protests and riots in the United States from the Vietnam War to Ferguson, Missouri. Freedom Road supports several Muslim and communist terrorist organizations. They have extensive networks in college campuses across the nation, and they can rally thousands of young people to their causes. Larry Holmes leads the Workers' World Party. He loves North Korea. Donald Trump, not so much.
Yesterday he was a monster, a racist, a misogynist, and today, well, he's our president. We must give him a chance. We're not giving him a chance. No peace, no peace, no Trump. No peace, no Trump.
Workers' World Youth leader Tom Michalak has been an active leader of the anti-Trump movement in New York and Detroit. In 2014, he traveled to Moscow as a guest of the anti-globalization movement of Russia.
The United States government is the greatest enemy to the peoples of the world.
Good evening, comrades and friends. I visited Moscow, Russia. Our host for the duration of our stay was Alexander Ianov, president of the anti-globalization movement of Russia. The underlying current among all their members is a staunch opposition to Western imperialism and the determination that all nations have the right to self-determination.
The movement is led by Moscow businessman Alexander Ianov. Comrade Ianov supports Syria, Iran, Venezuela, the Palestinian Authority, and anyone else who hates America.
Hello, comrades.
Funded directly by the Putin regime, the anti-globalization movement brings radicals from all over the world to Moscow to build an anti-globalist, or rather, an anti-American international movement. Freedom Road Socialist Organization leader Joe Eierspacher of Chicago was a guest of the anti-globalization movement in 2014 and again in 2015.
The largest loss of life in recent decades has occurred as a result of US-led wars.
I thought this was all a thing of the past. Why would Russia be supporting these kind of people today?
Russia's strategy now is not like the Soviet strategy of before in promoting an ideology and getting people to support an ideology. The strategy is, the other half of old Soviet strategy was to create chaos. So because it cannot, in a practical way, challenge us militarily, it can challenge us politically by promoting chaos. We in our country have a right to be whatever our political views are, but once any American starts collaborating with a regime that has thousands of nuclear warheads aimed at us to wipe us out, that's a completely different story.
In March 2016, Joe Eierspacher helped organize the student radicals who violently shut down a huge Trump rally in Chicago.
Late last year, one of the leaders of the anti-Trump movement in Chicago, Joe Eierspacher, spoke at a Chicago event with the Venezuelan ambassador to this country, and the purpose of the event was to organize opposition to candidate Trump. Does that concern you, or do you see any significance in that sort of action?
Well, this is kind of where you're wondering, where is somebody just expressing their constitutional right to dissent or to protest, which is protected, even if we don't always like it. And where do you draw the line? And one of the places where I would draw the line is, when is somebody stretching from legitimate dissent to active collusion with a foreign government? And in the Eierspacher case that you mentioned, that's stepping over the line. If you're working with a foreign ambassador of a regime that is known to be funding extremist radical activity around the world, then that has crossed the line from legitimate dissent to foreign subversion.
Minnesota Freedom Road leader Mick Kelly led the coalition to shut down Trump and the RNC. He is a big fan of Palestinian airline hijacker Laila Khaled and has worked closely with the terrorist Muslim Brotherhood front group Council on American Islamic Relations. In September 2010, the homes of Mick Kelly and his comrade Joe Eierspacher were raided by the FBI.
Now, on September 24th, 2010, the FBI raided homes in Chicago and Minneapolis of peace activists and labor organizers, all as part of a nationwide terrorism investigation. 23 subpoenas were issued for activists to appear at a grand jury in Chicago. And investigators reportedly were examining possible material support to Colombian and Palestinian groups designated as terrorist organizations by the U.S. government.
We faced 18 months in prison for contempt of court. And in addition, the charge of providing material support to foreign terrorist organizations carries a minimum of 15 years in prison for each charge.
More than 6 years later, the Obama Justice Department has yet to bring any charges. Meanwhile, Workers' World Party youth leaders are working to mobilize thousands of young people into the streets. Taran Fivek, who works on Syrian refugee resettlement for the United Nations, is running J20 out of New York. Romero Funes, a journalist, is organizing mass protests in Los Angeles.
So I've been involved with other comrades in planning the resistance that will happen on J20.
It's going to be one of the most important political events in modern history.
We've positioned ourselves as the revolutionary socialist contingent that's going to be present in D.C.
This is a global day of action. I want to just quickly list some of the cities where there are actions taking place. As we mentioned, D.C. and L.A., New York, of course, Rochester, Oakland, St. Petersburg, Florida, Atlanta, Savannah, Georgia, Chicago, Illinois, New Orleans, Boston, Baltimore, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Detroit, Charlotte, Durham, Raleigh, Buffalo, Cleveland, Portland, Philly, Huntington.
We refuse to be governed by such a racist, sexist monster. But it doesn't really matter to us either if they can go ahead and say we can't drop anybody off at metro stations, or they can pretend all that they want, that they can have control over the masses when they finally get into the streets. But as we all know, we're going to get there no matter what. We're going to be out there in force. We're going to be sending a really strong message to the rest of the world.
Every protest movement, every revolution needs to get their message out to the world. Workers' World Party member Caleb Maupin is reaching millions of Americans daily through his positions with Iran's Press TV and Moscow's Russia Today. There's a young man in America called Caleb Maupin, a member of the Workers' World Party, an extreme radical.
U.S. society, born in racism, slavery, and the slaughter of the indigenous people, is now entering a deep political and economic crisis.
Who's been working as a correspondent for Press TV, and now Russia Today, RT, going around these anti-Trump rallies, reporting on them, reporting on the division in American society.
Trump, he did win according to the U.S. Constitution, so you're saying you're protesting against the American democratic system, right?
So did Hitler. That doesn't mean we have to accept the way this as it is. We need to fight back against this fascist system.
Why do you think he'd be doing that?
Well, look at what he's doing and what he's working for. He's coming from a hardcore Marxist-Leninist fringe group that supports the North Korean regime, working as a paid agent for the Iranian government's propaganda machine, and then moving over as a paid agent to Vladimir Putin's propaganda machine. So when you're looking at this from a case of ideology, it doesn't make sense. How can a communist be working for Shiite Islamic fundamentalists and then for the gangster regime in Moscow? But if you think of it from what is the underlying agenda, which is the common purpose is to destroy America, it makes perfect sense.
This is the person that I know personally, again, not that I'm a friend, but I encountered him on a number of occasions.
You know who this man is? He's a Republican. He's not actually Russian. He goes to these things and tries to video people and makes these edited videos to make it look like all communists are stupid. So that's what he does.
We're just listening to his ideas.
You should know who he is. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
Listen,
you.
But
yeah,
Warren.
thank you. Okay, thank you. So that should tell you volume about the ideology and the direction of Russia Today, which is very much anti-capitalist, anti-American, but actually there's a better word, subversive. That's what they're trying to do, subvert our system. That's their goal.
Senior Workers' World leader Teresa Gutierrez is very clear on where the anti-Trump movement is really intended to lead.
Comrades, I ask you today, is our decisive link the struggle against Donald Trump? Let this conference answer that question today, throughout the day, and in the streets on January the 20th. And I finally, comrades, I believe with all my heart and soul that this is the party that will lead the revolution to take the White House down, that will make the United States of America a socialist country. The young people in this room will see it. The young people in this room will build it. So all power to the youth, all power to the revolution. Black Lives Matter. Sí se puede.
How can a new president or a new government get on top of this problem, get on top of these radical elements?
Well, on Inauguration Day, Donald Trump is going to take the oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's the law. All enemies, foreign and domestic. So the law recognizes that there are foreign enemies out there using subversion to destroy our constitutional way of life. But the law also recognizes that there are domestic enemies here in our own country that seek to destroy our constitutional way of life. Donald Trump has to take that oath more seriously than any other president ever has, because the problem has gotten so bad.
In our lifetimes, this great country has never been so deeply divided. Unity depends on tolerance and respect for those who disagree with us. To conservatives, liberals should not be our enemies, but honest opponents. Our common enemies are the extremists of both sides who seek to divide us. 150 years ago, America fought a bloody civil war to better implement the principles of liberty and justice for all. Should we ever again allow our divisions, no matter how deep, to be settled through hatred and violence? Is it not time for people of goodwill, Republican, Democrat, Independent and Libertarian, to unite once again to reform that perfect union?
Sisters and brothers, we are going to build that massive counter-inauguration protest on January 20th. We are going to shut this down. You know something? Trump has started something. We're going to finish it.
You want to find a presidential election that's kind of similar? You got to go back to Abraham Lincoln to find a moment when the country was so divided about an election. And you know what happened when Lincoln got into office? Within a few months, the South succeeded. Now, I'm not predicting secession or civil war, but I am predicting this because it's an easy prediction. The struggle against the Republican agenda, against the Trump agenda, it's on.